He's taking pictures.
Cool. That's
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Thank you for coming today.
Good to see
It's
you.
an absolute pleasure to see you again. And those of you who are watching, I just wanted to give a small introduction. Des is the expert in dealing with difficult situations if you're a landlord. And so here, he is the national expert in property licensing, planning, and enforcement and tribunal defenses. So if ever you guys need help, this is the man. And you can reach out to him on his website, which is www.landlords with an S, defense.co.uk. And reach out and ask your questions. And today we have prepared quite a few questions that are actually specifically designed to help landlords in difficult cases, or maybe help them to avoid to get to the difficult cases. Okay. So first of all, can you tell about yourself and how did you get involved in this? Like, what's the story behind? Like, did you had bailiffs knocking at your door and then you said, let me prove them a point, and then you did it, and then you decided to help others? Like, what's there? Why you decided? Because when you were growing up and you were a young kid, definitely that wasn't that one thing in your mind.
Absolutely not. And when you look at me and you look at my age and you see, I didn't just decide this yesterday, it's going to be my career for the rest of my life. And because I was a landlord managing HMOs, understanding the legislation, seeing the legislation change, I noticed in 2015 we had this big change with taxation, but that was followed in 2016 by something called the Housing and Planning Act 2016, and that changed everything for landlords when it came to property licensing and enforcement. And it meant that landlords were no longer had to be prosecuted in the magistrates' court. The council could now fine them through financial penalties, and tenants could now apply for rent repayment orders. And at this point, because I had quite a lot of legal training, having worked alongside my sister in a number of things in her legal career, this became something that I realised that I knew a lot about, but many people were coming to me for advice. And that's how this began.
Okay. And was there a case that you end up yourself, was like, okay, I now need to know how to defend myself?
Now that's very, very interesting. I did have a HMO, and that HMO was under an additional licensing scheme at the time, and it had 3 floors, but the additional licensing scheme kicked in at 3 occupants. And that property, I'd never actually seen it.
Yeah.
And because I'd never seen the property, I didn't realise that it needed licensing, and my team let me down. Now, not my team really, because it's my fault. I hold the responsibility. So the moment we found out, we had a conversation with the council. 5 days later, everything was done and made compliant in that property. And I am sad to say, yes, they did fine me. And in those days, that fine was £342. Only 342. Today, that fine would probably have been 17,500 to maybe 22,500.
Wow.
So that was one of the points, and this was long before the Landlord and Tenants were getting sorted in the Housing and Planning Act. It was something that nobody really understood. So,
Wow. Well, that difference between 17,000 and 20,000 pounds is already a big difference. But just think about 17,000 pounds, even if it's 17,000 pounds, it's like
that will wipe out most people's profit.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Not for 1 year.
Not for 1 year. Not for 1 year. Because people think landlords are super rich. But if you take the maintenance costs, if you take the financing cost, if you take the void times, okay, if you take the agency fees, if you take the management fees, barely there is even anything left. And sometimes landlords then choose to do everything themselves, but they don't have the knowledge. And then they end up in trouble where they need your help.
Absolutely. That's because they're amateur landlords.
Yeah.
They call themselves accidental landlords, but your parents don't die by accident. You don't get married. You don't go and move in with somebody by accident. What happens is you make a decision. And part of making that decision, you don't consider all the other things that are important, such as, I'm renting my property out, what's the legislation? You'd never get in a car or ride a motorbike without thinking, what do I need to do?
Yeah.
But we go and rent a house because we don't get told.
Yeah. Well, many people probably have the consideration was like, but how much would that cost me? But then they don't understand how much it will going to cost if they don't do it.
Absolutely. And I love the phrase, and it comes from a guy called Jim Rohn. It says you'll pay the price of discipline or you will pay the price of regret. And for many landlords, they're paying the price of regret because they didn't have the discipline or they didn't know that they needed to have the discipline to go and find out what you need to do within managing a property, letting a property. And some just give it to an agent and think, well, the agent will sort it all out, but the agent isn't qualified either. So it's the blind leading the blind, as they say.
So does a landlord can rely on agent to deal with the compliance of a property?
If the agent is suitably qualified and knows what they're doing. But so many aren't. So are they qualified? Have they gone and been trained? Have they got Property Mark or ALA accreditations? Have they got continuing professional development? Have they been accredited by the local authority in some places, such as Coventry and the likes in London? Really, you need to know that your agent is capable. And we have a process where landlords come to us if they've got an HMO and they want to find a good HMO manager. We have a 50-step process we have to go through to qualify that agent out.
Yeah. So this is a very good question, and I do believe that many landlords are going to have this question. It's like, okay, but how do I know which agent is good? How do I know which agent to pick if there is thousands of them? It's like you go on any high street, there's like 5-6 agencies on a high street. It's like, okay, and everyone will say, I'm the best. It's like, how do you know?
It's a bit like dating, I guess. But when you're dating, most people fall in love and they forget all the really important things, and then they have arguments when they get together and live together. What you've got to do is you've got to have a structured process. You've got to understand what is required, understand the legislation. And if you don't go through those things and find out what's required, then you're never going to know. And how do you find that out? You get yourself educated. How do you do that? You talk to people like our firm. You say, what do I need? What do I have to do? You find out, because every agent out there will tell you they're the best. Every landlord
100%.
will tell you the best.
Yeah.
Yeah? But it's a bit like in that film, The Shawshank Redemption. Everybody in here is innocent, okay? Yeah. But they're not. Some are guilty, some aren't. And we must go and do our due diligence. We must check the agent out. And what you've got to do is talk to other landlords. Okay. Another landlord's not going to tell you if they're rubbish.
Okay, a question. Would, for example, someone who is an amateur landlord, or maybe he just don't have all this knowledge, and he's like, now I need to find out. Can he reach out to you and get like some, at least a checklist or some recommendations, which agents to approach, which not, from you directly?
Yeah, you can call us. You can make an inquiry on our website. You can give us a call and say, I need some information. Can you help me? We produce an awful lot of information on our YouTube channel, which is Landlord Licensing and Defence. If you search Des Taylor Landlords on social media, you'll generally come up with my name, and you'll find our YouTube channel. If you look on there, if you want to manage a HMO, I've been through all the HMO management regulations. So you can work out all the things that you need to do. You can work out all the steps in selecting the right tenants for a property as well. So there's a lot of information there that you can rely upon. And we're building guides all the time. Currently, our latest guide is the 7 traps of licensing, because people don't realise when they license a property.
Can you share those 7 traps?
No, I'm not going to share them here, because what I would say, if you go to our website or you request it from the office, they will send it to you. Because it is something where there are various traps that people don't realise. Because when you're applying for a licence and you haven't had a licence when you should have done, you might be incriminating yourself. So you need to understand what you're doing. You need to understand what the councils are doing.
Okay, one question about those 7 steps and about the landlords. Okay, what would be the most common one thing that landlords miss out where they fell into this trap of like the regret? It's like, oh, I needed to do it.
Right. They decided they needed to do the work before they applied for the license.
I heard this somewhere.
Yeah, many people decide they've got to do the work. Now, let's be clear. You're going to make a declaration in that license application that the property meets all the requirements. Now, for most people, they don't even know what they're signing.
Yeah.
But if you make the application, the offence stops on the day you make the application.
Yeah.
If you're on the same day, you also got the contractor in doing the work and getting the work done, that's fantastic. If he takes a couple of extra days, quite frankly, nobody's going to be any the wiser. But the offence of not having a licence stops. What we see really commonly is, I need to get all the work done, then make the application for the licence. And what's happened, let's say those works take a month or 2 months. You've been committing the offence for another month, and you've got an extra month of potential rent repayment order to repay.
Yeah.
So I would suggest you apply for the license. If you don't know how to apply for the license, seek help from us. We do a licensing exploration call, which goes through your situation, your case, and what you need to do if you haven't got a license. What would be the right thing to do and the most prudent thing to do in your particular circumstances.
And a question here. Okay, a person, for example, would like to then do an HMO.
Yeah.
Okay? They have no understanding of it, but they just like, let me just split their rooms. But there is a certain square meters that needs to be met for that to be classed as a room, whether it's 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, I don't know the terms. But would then that not come into place as the first element? Because first of all, you need to know how many rooms, and then can you do an HMO, what you can do with it?
Yeah. So if you want to take a standard house,
Yeah.
there are many houses today which have what people refer to as a box room. And when you look at them, they're below the minimum standards. Now, the minimum standards we have for HMO rooms are 4.64 square meters for a child's room, 6.51 square meters for a single occupancy, and 10.22 square meters for a double occupancy room. We don't cater in HMOs or in standard houses for rooms to have more than 2 people. So those standards have been set. They're actually set out in the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985, and for HMOs they were set out in the prescribed the statutory instrument that was put in place in 2018 when we changed how licensing was done. So they became law, and they weren't then they weren't discretionary for somebody to say it's a little bit smaller, we'll let you use it. They were set down in law. But those sizes have related back from 1936 under something called the Public Safety Act 1936, where 50 square feet, 70 square feet, and 110 square feet were the sizes of the rooms, which have now been converted to square meters.
Yeah.
And those are the minimums. So if you've got a house and you look at the rooms, the first is this room suitable for occupation as per the law? And if it's suitable as per the law, can that person stay there? So if it's a small room, say it's a 5.5 square meters, it's only fit for a child.
Yeah.
Are you going to leave a child on their own in a HMO?
No.
Probably unlikely. So there's probably going to be some alterations needed. So you have to understand what the amenity standards are of the local council. Now, the amenity standards of the local council are not set out in law, but they're set out regionally for each council, and they will be slightly bigger. Now, if you want to keep the council happy, go to their standards. If you don't, go to
every
their
council may have a different requirements for how many square meters you need.
Yeah, for a single occupancy, double occupancy, and then there's another set of standards if it's got an ensuite, and there's another set of standards if it has some cooking facilities in there. And now we get into a whole nother area that if you've got a room that's got cooking, sleeping, and bathing facilities or washing facilities, then you've potentially, if not definitely, created self-containment. And then you've created essentially another dwelling within inside the property for which you would need planning permission.
Yeah.
So I see lots of people developing these HMOs, not realizing that although they might pass licensing, they might be infringing on planning and they might not. And then some meet building regulations and some don't. So you've got a whole bunch of things moving around here. It's a little bit like watching an old combustion engine with oil, water, fuel, air intake. All of these things are working together but independently and all interdependent on one another to make the engine flow.
So what would be the right step here? Okay, let's say someone gets a property. Okay, that's the first thing. Now the next thing is like they're thinking what to do. Okay, should they get the planning? Should they get the architects? Should they get the licensing? What would be the first thing? They want to maximize the returns after the property.
Okay, so I think the most important thing here is to think a bit like the medicine and medical industry. So the guy who deals with your toes isn't like the woman who might deal with your teeth, who might not be the woman who deals with your heart. And they, those doctors, those surgeons, those consultants, they all have their specializations.
Yeah.
And then you have the general practitioner who always refers you to the specialist. So my advice is you need somebody who's a generalist to look at it, and then you need to then go to the specialist to deal with all their different areas, and then somebody who can bring it together.
Yeah.
So normally, somebody who's a HMO developer
Yeah.
has done it many, many times, will know what to do.
Yeah.
But many of them are busy running their own. And they don't always keep up to date with what's going on with the legislation because they come to companies like us to talk to them and go, can you tell us what's happening here, what's happening there? Some of our largest clients have thousands of HMOs and some of them just have a handful. But each and every one of them has similar problems.
What is the number one problem?
The number one problem is generally they've done something without checking whether it's compliant, or they've introduced something as a good idea that they got from somebody, which wasn't really such a good idea in the end because it didn't meet all the requirements of the council, both in planning, licensing and building regulations.
So would then the roadmap look like this? Get some plans in place and decide what you want to do with it. And then with those plans, go to that specialist and then confirm how this plan can be implemented.
Absolutely. I would say get your idea.
Yeah.
Nothing special. Draw it out on a piece of paper. If you've got floor plans, look at what you want to do. Stick them into some AI engine. Say, can you make that look a bit pretty for me? Because you can put a handwritten drawing in. Can you make that a little bit more pretty for me? Then type up what you want to, get AI to say it more nicely, and then send it to somebody like us and say, what would your advice be here? Have a short consultation with us. Let us go through with it and say possibility, no possibility. Yes, there's a possibility with this. And then if you need to be directed to somebody for help to make it right, we'll help you with that. Sometimes you need planning. Sometimes you don't need planning at all. You can do everything you need to do under permitted development.
Yeah.
But sometimes you've got a building that's never going to meet building regulations, but you think it is because you've got building regulations on part of it. And like today, I spoke to a gentleman and he's got an EPC problem on one of his flats. Turns out he's got 5 flats in the building. And then it turns out that it's not just an EPC problem he's also got an additional licensing problem under what's called Section 257. So he needs a license. And then one of the flats has got 3 people in it and he needs an additional license for that one as well. So out of a little EPC inquiry, he's got a whole bunch of licensing problems that he didn't even realise about. So in those cases, the immediate thing was I knew somebody who could help him, advise him. We put him onto that person to deal, first of all, with the EPC part, because interestingly, it's the same department that does enforcement of EPCs that aren't compliant as does enforcement of housing standards and licensing and those types of things. And interestingly, they slipped in a property licensing pamphlet for him. So they know he hasn't got a license, but they've not said they're going to enforce. So he might be lucky, just like Rachel Reeves.
Oh, wow. So what's the story with Rachel Reeves? She get away?
Is she going to get away with it? That depends. Let's see. So the reality here is she had an agent. It looks like she had 2 agents. Yeah. It looks like she spoke to 2 agents, and it looks like she gave them the responsibility. Now, an agent in law acts for and on your behalf and in your name. Yeah. So you can't blame the agent. The agent hasn't done the job in her name, so she didn't have a license. Where it seems to be to her advantage is Southwark, which is one of the councils I find the least aggressive when it comes to enforcement. Their policy says, we will send a letter and we give you 21 days to make the application. Yeah. They haven't sent a letter because they weren't aware. They've become aware and they haven't needed to send her a letter to license the property because she's acted immediately, which is really good. Now, does that mean they're not going to enforce? Probably. Because there are things they can do. They can do an investigation. Is it in the public interest? But even if they did impose a fine upon her, if it goes against the policy and they haven't followed their policy, then the first tier tribunal could actually overturn it. So why would they put themselves at that risk? So that then leaves the other part, which is the rent repayment order. Yeah. And that means that the tenant...
That was one of the questions, but okay, you go for it.
The rent repayment order for her is, will the tenant make the application? Now, they will make the application because it's been publicised. They would be foolish not to. Yeah. The second thing is she going to employ somebody like me to help her, or our company to help her, to solve this problem? Probably. Because if she tries to solve it herself, she's probably going to pay more. She may not have the right agreement to solve it, but you don't even need the tenant to apply for the first tier tribunal. If she's guilty and it went to a tribunal hearing, the judge would have 2 decisions to make. Does she have a legal defence? And does she have a reasonable excuse defence? I'd question she doesn't have a legal defence because she didn't have a licence. It's strict liability. Does she have reasonable excuse? The agent said they take responsibility. That will really come down to what's in the management agreement that she got. And if it's not in there, then I'm going to suggest that she doesn't have a reasonable excuse defence, and I'm going to suggest that she would be better off trying to settle this long before even an application is done with the right
But she
person.
has the 21 days.
Sorry?
She has the 21 days.
She doesn't have 21 days when it comes to the rent repayment order. That's got nothing to do with it.
Oh, okay.
She needed to have that licence, and she's been without the licence.
Okay.
So the council is one part, that's enforcement, and the council has 6 months to do anything about it, and they're probably not going to do anything more, but that remains to be seen. And then with the rent repayment order, the tenant has up to 12 months. And under the Renters' Rights Act 2025, that is changing to 2 years to make a claim and up to 2 years rent. Wow. Interestingly, how this all became public the day after the Renters' Rights Act got royal assent. But
Wow.
you never know what was really going on.
No. And look, you also touched EPC. And you
Yes.
said there's the same department that is enforcing the EPCs.
Yes.
Okay, so we all know, and maybe some of you who don't know, that you have to have a valid EPC before you're selling or renting a property. So if someone doesn't know that and they sell or rent the property without a valid EPC, they even didn't know that they have to check the EPC. Okay, what are the fines there?
They commit an offence, and generally the fine is going to be up to a £5,000 fine. That's what we see regularly.
Yeah.
You could apply for an exemption if you qualify for an exemption, but in most cases people don't know they can even apply for an exemption, so they commit the offence, and then of course they're guilty. So they will be dealt with generally by the way of a civil penalty fine rather than being taken to the magistrate's court.
And in which cases then the council approaches the landlords for this specific claim about the EPCs? Like, does actually council is monitoring every single listing online that is happening? I don't think so.
I wouldn't like to say they are, but I wouldn't like to say they're not.
Yeah.
There's plenty of technology out there, and since 2015, 2016, they've been using machine learning, which most of us would call artificial intelligence, to tie up the various different databases they have. And there are 38 different databases councils have that have been applying machine learning. Now, that generally comes from which software companies they're using to outsource and manage their data. And if it's a particular company, they've been doing it very well since 2016. They will be gathering the data, and they will know whether you've got an EPC or not, and then whether it's qualified. But these are public record. Now, I'll be frank with you, it doesn't take a lot for somebody to write a program, go through the EPC registers that aren't E, so pick everything that's got F and G, and then work out whether the name of on the council tax is the same name as on the land registry. It's not very many questions.
Yeah.
And then give me a list of them.
It's
and
an
just
easy.
send a bunch of letters out automatically from a mailing house that says, we believe you committed an offence. Let the landlord defend himself.
I think it is the same as easy as finding people for parking tickets.
Yeah.
Because you have registration number plate, you know who is the person who you need to go against, and you just send the letters, and it's simple and easy. But if you have someone who is stealing phones, that's not easy, because you need to find who is the person, you need to do an investigation, no one wants to deal with it. So therefore, the phone thefts and bike thefts and all of this is happening, because simply it's difficult and not cost effective to chase them. But chasing landlord or chasing the car owner who is paying the taxes and who has the registration number plate, or he has his property registered in land registry, it's an easy way to get to the person who you can send the ticket.
It is, and we're going to have the landlord's database, which is going to have to be registered under the Renters' Rights Act. Everybody's data is going to be in there. I'm not so sure about how public it's going to be. I think we're going to see, for those of you who are old enough to remember what happened with the Companies Act, where every director's home address was on there. I think what's going to happen is, like happened with the life sciences, when the people started attacking the directors in their own homes and rioting and campaigning and being basically causing disruption outside directors' homes on the weekend, what they did was they changed the Companies Act so that you could have a service address. And I think what's going to happen for landlords is we're going to have service addresses for landlords so their home addresses aren't actually revealed, and many of them will use agents for that. But what we don't want to do is to see people getting upset because I'm a landlord, my tenant got upset with me, now they're campaigning outside my house, and I don't particularly want that. And I don't think we should allow that. So I think there's some work to be done. I think it will be a lot easier for tenants to find their landlord, find out whether their landlord is a good landlord or a bad landlord. All their fines and all their rent repayment orders will eventually be published along with all the certificates for the property. So in some ways, if I want to get a landlord, I'm going to get a landlord who has no problems. I'm probably going to find a landlord that's got no problems and probably has higher rents. I'm also going to find out he's got all the certificates. And any landlord who hasn't got the certificates that are required, well, I don't really want to live in that house because if he isn't doing one thing well, he's not going to do the others. And if he's got lots of fines behind him, why would I want to live in that property? So I think it's going to be good in some ways, but it's going to be bad in other ways. But there'll always be rogue landlords. There's never been a law that's been made that hasn't stopped people breaking them. So I think there's good things and bad things to come, but let's see what happens. But I think landlords are not going to like the exposure of the personal address and personal details. And I think that will, as time goes on, they'll come to realise
some kind of protection.
There'll be a service address, which you can already do in a tenancy. It's already covered under the Landlord and Tenants Act, Section 47 and Section 48.
Okay, and here you mentioned government having AI power to find those landlords, to find those people who are not licensed, to basically crack down on them, okay? And now we know that Elon Musk was doing the Doge, was the government efficiency department something, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, and then was revealed that everyone is running from old kind of systems. People who have long passed away, 120 years old, they've been paid benefits and other things. Clearly, the government in USA doesn't have those AI systems. My question is this: if the USA government is still running on some kind of old systems where it's complete mess and they're paying people who are long dead or who doesn't even exist, now my question is this: how more ahead is UK government in implementing like modern computers or actually having those AI systems to identify where the money is spent completely without any reason and where there is actually an offense caused? Because one thing is what we want to say publicly to scare everyone because it's a scarcity mindset, but then the next thing is like how much actually government is taking up the new technology, because it's hard to move a big giant and implement some new changes.
I think we'll be marketed that they know more than they do.
Yeah.
And by human nature, we will feel intimidated and we will say things that may incriminate us that we didn't wish to say because we don't know, because of their bluffs and the things that they do, that they are actually bluffing.
But do you feel like there is some bluffing going on here?
I think the idealism of what we want is fantastic. The time it's going to take, how quickly we're going to be able to use that data is going to take a while. And since 2016, we're now in 2025. The Housing and Planning Act 2016 came into effect in 2017. So for 8 years, and we still haven't got that perfect, and lots of councils are doing things differently. Would it be good if all the 348, I think it is, local housing authorities had the same systems and the same way of fining and the same policies for room sizes and all of those things? Absolutely, probably. But what does that mean for the local areas? We see the different areas currently, local councils being formed into bigger unitary authorities, etc. Things are changing. What does that really mean? None of us really knows. But when we do find out, I think that what you'll see is that enforcement will be joined together, and I think that it will be a lot easier for them to catch us. All of us need to expect that if you've had a parking ticket or you've had a speeding fine, if you're a landlord, you're going to have some sort of fine at some time in the future, because if you don't get the tenancy right, you serve the wrong notice, all of the basic things that we used to not really get into trouble for, and the tenant had to take us to the county court or the council had to take us to the magistrate's court, now they're going to have powers to just give us fines. And as long as they've got the evidence at the right level, then they'll be able to give us fines. Do we want those fines? Probably not. Are we going to change if we don't have them? Well, I think time has proven over and over again, when you hurt people in the pocket, they tend to change. Now, there'll be people who can always buy their way out, but they can only do that for so long, because if you're an investor, fines aren't investments.
No. I think this is the quote of the podcast. Fines are not investments.
No, they're not. A fine is not an investment. If you are an investor and you're paying fines and wiping out profits, what else are you doing that's crazy? Now, that brings me on to a very important point. I had a call today where you've got people who are unqualified managing properties because they're trying to help their friends.
Yeah.
If you are deciding to rent a house and you're going to rent it with your friends and you want to rent it from the landlord, and you might be, as in this case, somebody from a foreign country, and some of the people who were their friends who were sharing the house with them didn't have bank accounts in the United Kingdom. So monies were being sent out of the United Kingdom to pay the rent, being converted into British pounds from a foreign currency, sent back. It got all very complicated. These are the sorts of things that sound and look like money laundering. And really, it was just innocent people trying to help their friends who are committing offences they didn't probably realise they were committing, and not registered and doing what they need to.
Yeah.
All the time, there's a landlord at the end of this who's owning a property, who's receiving rent, who doesn't even realise he's involved. So it really is important, if you're a landlord and you want to rent your property, you know who's living in it, you know who's managing it, and if you're not managing it, who is? And if you're going to get somebody to manage it, make sure they're qualified.
Yeah. Okay, so what is better to be, a landlord or a tenant?
Today, I think a tenant has a lot of benefits, lots and lots of benefits, lots of things that look like they're on their side. But in reality, many of those tenants would like to be able to own their own property, and they can't. As a landlord, is it to be better? I think it is if you're a good landlord. You understand that it's not short term. You're prepared to do whatever is required. And I think over the period of 20 to 25 years of an investment, property will continue to return, because I've got the experience of many landlords who I see who are clients. We talk about things. Not all my clients are bad. They want advice. They want help. They want to move forward. They see changes. The older landlords I see, some of them have changed with the times. They've become very, very wealthy while they've changed with the times. They've complied with all the different changes. And they've seen some of the worst changes and some of the worst things happen over 50 and 60 years. So if you're in for the long term, yes. Would I advise you to get into property today? What I would advise you to do is accumulate some capital. I'd advise anybody, once you've got some capital, to understand why you're getting in and what the purpose is and for how long, and to take advice from people who've walked your path already that you want to take. And if they haven't walked that path and they haven't had some hiccups along the way, they're only telling you the best part, they haven't got horror stories, don't listen to them.
Yeah.
Because there's horror stories for all of us.
Yes. And now the difference for those listeners, when we talk about getting into property, there's two things how you get into property. One is you actually live in the property, where most of what we talk now probably doesn't apply. And the second is if you're doing it as a business, where you're renting it out, renting a rooms, doing an HMOs. So now, if someone is just thinking, I want to buy my own house, whether it's house or flat, whatever. Okay, what they have to be careful of?
So if you're living in your own house and you decide today that you want to make some money from that house, we have the rent a room scheme. So you can rent a room up to £7,500 worth of rental income for absolutely no taxes. As long as you don't restrict that person and self-contain them so they have access to the things that you have access to, then those people are sitting and living in your property as a lodger. You can have up to 2 lodgers in your property without breaching any laws, as long as you don't completely separate them. If they can use your kitchen, they might have their own bathroom, they could have an ensuite room, but as long as they're not completely separated from you, then in general terms, and each case has its own, you can have up to 2 lodgers without committing any offences. When you get that 3rd lodger, that property now becomes a HMO. Whether it needs a licence or not depends whether you're one person on your own or whether there are, and you've got 3 lodgers, then that's 4. If it's not in an additional licensing area, then it might not need licensing, but it will need to comply with the HMO management regulations. Now, the other thing is, if you go to 5, then it will need a mandatory HMO license and anything further than that. So now you might say, well, how does that work if I've got, say, a family? So I've got a mum and dad, I've got 4 kids, so that's 6 people, and now I've got 2 lodges, so I've got 8 people. Does that need a license? No. It's 2
people.
lodges. Yeah, it's 2 lodges in addition to the single household that lives in the house. Many people get that wrong. So you could have 8 people living in a house. I grew up in a house, and there were quite a lot in my family, and we had a couple who rented a room and had a bathroom a kitchen they used, and they shared a bathroom. Yeah. Now, we had more than one bathroom, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a large number, but we would have, even in those days, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we didn't need a HMO license. They didn't have them in those days. It wasn't called a HMO. But in those days, yes, even then, it was very, very different. But if we'd had a third person, then yeah, they would in today's law.
So looking out for the third person. So landlord can buy a property, they can invest, and they can rent out 2 of the rooms, but watching out for renting the third room, because then different rules apply.
Absolutely. And if you're going to buy a house, or some people do rent to rent, if you're going to buy a property and you're going to rent it out, even if you live in that property, as it's the same rules apply. But if you don't live in the property, then you need to go and investigate what the regulations are. Look on the local website of the local council, because you need to understand what the local council wants. Look at the licensing, look at the planning, and make sure you're not doing something that you shouldn't be. And if you don't know what you're doing, give us a call. We'll see how we can help.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I have some few questions.
Of course.
I wanted to go to, and the introduction was good. And usually everything starts with a personal story. So, because what's actually driving a person? What's most of the time driving people is some kind of a bad experience, some kind of a pain. And they either want to avoid it, or they already have the pain and they want to run away from it. And then from there, we learn, we grow, we reflect, we implement. And if there was a big problem that we managed to solve, then we are able now to help other people. And I think that is as an encouragement, that even if someone is going through a difficult season, it's not the end yet. It may be a difficult season now, but it may serve as an encouragement and as a story for other people to help them. And sometimes those stories cost a lot.
Sometimes they do.
Sometimes they cost a lot. But that's not the end of the story. If we decide that we're going to use it for what's good and what's honorable. And I know some property developers who have stories where they have paid for the education £40,000 because they picked the wrong builders. But now they know how to pick the right builders. But that lesson was £40,000.
Yes, and we have experience. I've had experience of that lately with people. I've got a couple of cases where the builder has not done what they should have done. They've used the wrong brick, or they've not followed the plan exactly. That's attracted attention. That's had the planning enforcement come out. They've come out to look at it. Planning's then alerted licensing there's an issue, and it's costing them money. Whether that money is in that they've got to change something, or they've got a planning enforcement notice, or they've got to appeal something, there's going to be a price to pay. Back to what we said before. I love the saying, it's not mine. I will never take it as mine. We have to be disciplined, otherwise we will pay a price.
Yeah.
So you may as well pay the price now,
Yeah.
because you will pay the price later.
No one likes to pay the price now.
Yeah.
Everyone likes to avoid the price.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens actually when the council starts the criminal investigation into a landlord?
So what normally happens is they send you a letter, or they might give you a phone call. Some councils just say, "Hi, just calling you about such and such a property. Are you the landlord?" "Yes." "Can you tell me about such and such a tenant, or is it a HMO?" Well, if somebody rang me up and said, "I'm from your bank, can you tell me how much money you've got in there?" I would have a standard answer. I can't tell you who I am, and I don't know who you are. And if you are who you say you are, and I am who you think I am,
You can have a look.
then send me what it is in writing that you want to say.
Yeah.
Now, if they are the right person, something will come on the right paperwork from the right place. Now, you should do the same with the council calling you. No matter what they say, no matter how urgent it is, if they're calling the police, if they say the place is on fire, the police or the ambulance or the fire brigade are going to be at the property, and the relevant emergency services will have alerted you. And if you are the person, the police will come to your property or come to your place of work. There are all those things. I don't listen to anybody who calls me up. I treat everybody as a cyber criminal. Why? Because I don't know who you are. Why would I answer questions?
Yeah.
Because you might not be the same person. Do you think that when the Daily Mail called Rachel Reeves, they said they were the Daily Mail? Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah. So in the same way, you've got to make sure you don't answer anything, because self-incrimination happens all the time. So it normally starts with a phone call or a letter. The moment you get that, you should seek professional advice. Even though you know the answer, it looks like a simple answer. You've answered one question.
Landlordsdefense.co.uk.
Okay. But when you answer something, you've answered one thing. Now they get you to answer another and another and another. This is the technique of interrogators use. If I can get you to agree to one thing, then I'll agree to another. You've heard the phrase, get your foot in the door?
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, it's the same way. Once you get your foot in the door, well, we'll just keep moving at it. It's an old sales technique.
Yeah.
So the council does the same, because they go through 7 levels of investigation training in order to know how to get information from you. And then they'll send you a questionnaire, maybe a Section 16 questionnaire or a Section 235 questionnaire. People think, it's just another questionnaire, I won't bother. Seek professional advice, because those are self-incrimination forms.
Yeah.
But it's a legal requirement to complete them.
Yeah.
If you don't, they can take you to the magistrate's court, and the fine to jail. One is £1,000, well, the other one's £5,000. Okay, as a minimum. Then in addition to that, they then do something called a police and criminal evidence interview. Now, not all of them do that. If they've got enough evidence, then why do they need to interview you? Some call it an interview under caution, and they do that to fill in the gaps. So, you know, on those TV cop dramas where they've got the recording and you've got the 2 coppers and you've got the person they're interviewing and their solicitor or their lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, it's those types of interviews they do in the council offices. Some councils love them. Yeah, I think they do it for practice, because I think they want to be like on the TV. But nobody's ever come out of one of those saying to me, I'm really glad I went and did that. They always come out saying, that was the worst moment of my life. I didn't realise how serious it was. And I said, well, when they told you you were free to leave, why didn't you leave? I didn't feel comfortable. Just get up and walk out. You don't have to answer any questions. They're voluntary. Now, it goes against you if you don't help with the investigation. So if you get one in writing, which they quite often do, there's one council calls it a letter of an alleged offence, and they actually caution you in these letters. And then people fill them in and sign them. Why would you fill in and sign a statement without taking legal advice?
Yeah.
Get professional advice each and every time, and make sure that you're not doing something that you shouldn't. Up to that point, you're not in a situation where you definitely need a solicitor, but you definitely need professional advice. You shouldn't be admitting to anything at this stage. That is your legal right. In America, they call it the Miranda right, so we call it our right to silence. And that has been in place for thousands of years. Yeah, it goes back to long before. It was actually used 2,000 years ago or so. And it's actually enshrined in English law, the right to silence.
How it's in the movies. You have the right to stay silent, and everything that you say may be against you in the court.
Peter, you say that a little bit too more familiarly. Are you a policeman, or you had it served on you? But you've got it exactly. And that's exactly the same. But people go, but it's just the council. Just because they're the council, they're like plainclothes policemen. Yeah? Plainclothes police people, or women, or police officers who are essentially not wearing police badges. Some do go around with their identity cards and they think they're like cops. Yeah, there's a few of them.
Investigation.
And they do all that, and they turn up and they act like that. It's just like on the TV. But you've got to be really certain that to block them in the execution of their duties is the same as preventing a police officer from doing their duties. So be very, very careful.
Yeah, you cannot kind of put the bricks sticks in the wheels.
No.
But you don't actually have to give everything as well.
No. So if they knock on your door, you don't have to open it. You don't have to open the door because somebody knocks on it. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, in one of the recent license conditions, I saw that they said, please put on a security chain on the front door, or put a viewer through the door on the HMO. Why? Because even the council knows that you don't have to open the door before you identify who it is.
Yeah.
And as I was taught by a gentleman who was in the Secret Service in the USA, he said if a police officer calls at your door and you didn't call them, they didn't come for your benefit. So,
Exactly.
so you should be advising your tenants that no matter who calls at the door and no matter what they say, if they say they're from the council and they have a right of entry, they don't unless they have a warrant.
Yeah.
And they should give 24 hours notice, although that's all going to change under the Renters' Rights Act. But you should say to them, please book an appointment. You don't have to open the door to them. And invite your tenants not to invite anybody into the house just because they say they're an authority.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the tenants wish they hadn't invited them in either. Okay? Because tenants don't realise...
They don't know.
They don't realise that they're now going to become the greatest asset for the council and they're going to ask them to be witnesses against their landlord. And some of them give all this information, share all this information, and even sign the information, not realising that they may have to appear in front of a judge in a tribunal against their landlord.
And if they don't, then...
Some people don't hate their landlord that much.
Yeah, but if the tenant then doesn't show up in the court, what then happens? Then
Well,
they go against the tenant or not?
It won't
No.
go against the tenant
No.
because, of course, the judiciary is going to use their statement or the information or the signed information
Yeah.
and say, well, we rely upon this because
Yeah.
they've signed it as their statement of truth.
Yeah.
The key here is don't be signing stuff. Don't be letting your tenants sign stuff. Educate your tenants that in any complaints procedure that there are various steps they need to, and you should always have one. And the number for calling the council should be about number 9 in the process. So when the council calls you and you've turned them away and they send you a letter about it, you can go back to the council through professional advice and say, did the tenant do the other previous 8 steps in the complaints procedure? Because we have a complaints procedure and this looks like the first we've heard of it. The council at that point should be going back to the tenant and saying, have you done the first 8 steps? And if they haven't, they should say, go back and do the first 8 steps. Now, of course, if the tenant's life's in danger or there's a safety hazard, they might skip those, but it very rarely is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And when someone may knock at your doors, they may not even know and forget all of it. They may feel stressed. They may be anxious. They may be fearful. Someone is knocking. They have authority. And it's like, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Sign here. Okay, okay. And then the whole thing goes from there.
Imagine an officer in the council is on a bonus for getting more fines than anyone else. Just imagine. I'm not saying it's true, but imagine. They're going to be a little bit more forceful to make sure they secure these things than anybody else. But I'm not saying they are, but
be more motivation.
if that's the job, then I'd like it.
I
All
was-
those bonuses.
I was always wondering, is the parking ticket guys, they get any bonuses? Because they are like, they're on it. It's like 1 minute, 2 minutes on it. I was like, I have the feeling, I don't know, but I have the feeling, it's like, there probably is some kind of incentives. Otherwise, it's a very bad job. Arguing all the time with people.
Well, you're not allowed to argue with them because they make it, that becomes antisocial behaviour. What I predicted back in 2017 was that the people who are doing the parking are walking down the streets, so they will now be observing and picking up other things. So they'll be observing how many people are leaving a property in the morning, how the bins are laid out, how many bins there are, any antisocial behaviour, what's going on in the street, and reporting it. And what you'll see is those that used to just do parking, they're now called civil enforcement officers. And because they're civil enforcement officers, they're doing all civil enforcement. So they're looking at litter, they're looking at dustbins, they're looking at how the waste management is of the HMOs, they're looking at properties that have changed. So that was a quiet house and just
Do
had
they
one car in front
actually
of it.
do all those side activities?
What do you think that camera is that they wear here with the body cam is doing all the time? Gathering information all the time.
Yeah.
They may not even
But does
see it
someone
themselves.
has the time actually to go and watch all these hours of like...
No, they don't. You've got a artificial intelligence or machine learning that can watch those videos and tell them the answers.
When it comes into... When they apply it, when it's actually going live.
Well, so if you go to YouTube, get a YouTube link and drop it into one of these AIs, it will analyze them.
Whether
you can drop
whether
a
the government
video.
is doing it or no, it's a different question.
Yeah. Well, they get
They
videos.
get that. They will probably get there. Everything is moving towards it, but the question is whether it's active now.
How quickly we don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So another question. Okay. Can you describe a case where landlord was unfairly targeted, and what did you do to turn it around?
Right. So I'm going to tell you about a landlord where it eventually came to the point where they gave up. So the landlord had a property. He bought the property in auction. The agent was managing it for him when it was bought. When he bought it in auction, it eventually became vacant. He let it out to a new couple. He refurbished the house. It was absolutely lovely. And the couple then split up. And the lady left the property, and the gentleman in the property became dependent on others for his habits and began to become part of people that he needed to pay money to keep his habit going. The house became into disrepair. They wouldn't allow the agent in to do the gas safety certificate, wouldn't allow them in for anything. It was looking outside a bit messy. They tried to do something about it, and every time they went to the house, large dogs barked and no contractor would go to the house. Move that forward, so the agent says, I need to do a gas safety certificate, can't get in. Before they go and look for a court order, they went to speak to the local housing authority. The local housing authority eventually didn't get in the first time. On the second time, they eventually got to the property based upon serving a notice on the tenant and the tenant giving them access. On entering the house had been physically wrecked inside. I mean, doors smashed off hinges, walls with holes in, disrepair, carpets full of pee from a cat, holes in carpets. Everything was quite bad. So you'd expect in this situation that the council would want to do something to help. In fact, the council became very angry. The council decided to enforce against the landlord and the agent, because in the license condition, the selective license that they had both agreed to, it said one of the conditions, we will keep the house in good repair at all times. So it wasn't in good repair because it was being smashed up by the tenant.
Yeah.
So the landlord spent a lot of money to fix it and repairs it, and on the next inspection, a very short while later, smashed up again. They'd repair it again. The council's continuing to issue fines against them because of this. So representations were done. There was a small reduction in the fines, but the fines weren't massive fines. This was the hard part. They'd been massive. There would have been more to do. In the end, when they went to appeal, it got to a point where both the landlord and the agent said, just take the pain away. You talked about the pain earlier. Just take the pain away. And the reason being was the cost to go through the process of the time, the heartache and everything, just to be a nasty council who is very aggressive, very wrong, and quite frankly misleading, is outrageous. And they just said, we need to just get rid of this. So in the end, they decided that they would just pay the fines and go
leave
away.
it.
Now, I could have fixed it. We could probably have gone there. But what was worse, and this is why they stopped, the house was what they call a cuckooing house. So it's basically being used for illegal purposes and the guy who's living in the house really isn't in control. Somebody else is controlling it, and they're using the house for something else. In working with the council in that department, which is a different department, the agent thought that they were working together.
Yes, that's why he approached them.
Yeah, but when the tribunal papers came from the council, it was horrific to watch how something helping to get the house vacated, to get the closure order with the police, all the assistance had been twisted in documentation to make it look like the agent and the landlord were incompetent and that it was their fault and it was that bad. It was at that point they realised there is no justice.
And the landlord didn't want it to then get rid of the tenant when no.
The landlord couldn't get rid of the tenant.
And the tenant was paying or no?
We'll not go into all of that, but the tenant was a very vulnerable tenant, and they needed a closure order. They Section 8 and the Section 21s that had been issued, they were still waiting for court dates. It didn't work. And even all of those things, it really frustrates me. It broke my heart to see what the council had done. And then when I read it and they looked at it, they've gone, no judge is going to believe us. They've twisted this because they've got endless amounts of money. Yeah. And what's worrying is that we have ministers who break the law. We have chancellors of exchequer that break the law. and they don't understand the pain they're causing to others in this. And that council, I have no respect for the way they go about things. I have no respect for their arrogance. And one day someone will have the gumption in Parliament to stop this and to make it uniform across the country, uniform like it is with speeding, etc. So we understand what the rules are. Everybody understands them. And it's impossible for a landlord who gives complete control of a property to a tenant under quiet enjoyment rules to prove that it can be in good repair at all times while giving them quiet enjoyment. We need to really seriously look at how licensing is enforced and the conditions that the councils make, which are so unilaterally encompassing that there is no defence.
Yeah, and it sounds like there is no responsibility for tenants whatsoever. It sounds like the tenant is doing what he wants. He's living his life, but he's under control, whatever their life circumstances. But see, I know that in this case, the council, instead of trying to solve the problem, they're like, let's punish the landlord and that we're going to solve the problem. But the problem wasn't the landlord, but then the person who was living there. And what they needed to is help the person who is struggling rather than punish someone who's trying to make it work.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I actually sought counsel from another head of housing enforcement and housing standards at another council, which happened to begin with the same letter of the alphabet, about 200 miles west of this one. And no, maybe not even 200 miles, maybe an hour and a half west of them. And interestingly, their way of dealing with this would have been to support the landlord, not argue with the landlord. Yeah.
So it may be down to the council. It can also be down to a person that deals with your case.
Well, you know, it's interesting because they talk about county lines in drugs. Yeah. Now the county lines I remember from the Dukes of Hazzard as a kid. You know, getting over the county line so the sheriff and the deputy can't get you. Yeah, I'm out of the jurisdiction. Well, it's like that in England. Every council is like a different rule. They apply the rules differently. The one next to the other. So in one place you could have one set of rules. In the next, over the border, in some parts, in some cities, you've got one set of rules on one side of the street and one set of rules on the other.
Okay, from your experience, what is that one council that landlords or investors should be avoiding?
I can't say one. I'll give you 4.
Okay.
Okay. If you don't want to get things right, you need to avoid Salford, Coventry, Camden, and Bristol. Okay.
Those are the...
Right? And Leeds. I'd say Salford, Camden, Coventry, Bristol, Leeds. Because they are strong in their enforcement. They're set in their rules. Sometimes things aren't as they appear. Being a landlord or a letting agent or a property manager today is a profession.
Yeah.
And the standards that they will be held to are the same way as any other profession is being held to: a doctor, a nurse, a dentist, an architect, a surveyor. All of those professions, engineers. When you look at how a plane, what all that has to go into an aeroplane taking off, and all of the different people from the moment you enter an airport to that plane leaving, all the different things that are involved. In the airline industry, when mistakes are made, they want to fix them.
Yeah.
So they never happen again when there's a disaster. In housing, we haven't been that good. Okay. They're trying to be very strong. Will it be good in the end? Yes. Will it solve everything? No. Will everything be perfect? No. But will we raise the standard? Of course we will. But at what price? If you're prepared to pay the price of compliance, it will always be less than the cost of defence.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing it. Okay. So have you seen an increase in council pursuing rent repayment orders, and what's driving that?
So councils generally don't pursue rent repayment orders except when they're paying the housing benefit. So it's very rare I see those because they don't. Too much effort goes into it. Most of the time they can't be bothered. The reason tenants do is there are a number of firms out there who offer them no win, no fee. Or they do a small fee to get involved, to investigate the case and go after the landlord.
Encourages them, yeah.
It encourages them. Now, if you don't have a license, which is the most common reason to go for a rent repayment order, as long as the tenant can prove that beyond reasonable doubt, which is not as difficult as one might think, the judge is going to rely upon that and you're guilty. So if you're already guilty, there's no point, if everything shows that you're guilty, saying I'm innocent.
Yeah.
When I look at all the cases where landlords have chosen to prove their innocence and failed each and every time, that landlord should never, ever have even started the argument because it was crazy. Yeah. In the very few cases, and I have dealt with thousands of cases for civil penalties and rent repayment orders, over 3,000, I can tell you that very, very few, less than one handful of people are actually innocent. One handful. I've got one case that is an illegal eviction, but the landlord isn't the illegal evictor. It's a more superior landlord who's the illegal evictor. So they won't win that one. So we will win that case. I don't think it'll even get to a hearing. We had a case where the local housing authority tried to imply to the tenants that the landlord didn't have a license and he didn't have a valid license. We went all the way to a hearing, and I was able to prove on Valentine's Day this year that he was actually innocent. Well, we call it the Valentine's Day massacre, because what was very unusual was the landlord was a good landlord. He was a very credible landlord. Interestingly, all the tenants were actors by profession. And some of the complaints they were making was he didn't provide fire extinguishers. The judge asked them, so did you ask for fire extinguishers in the time you were in tenancy? No. He said, well, then if you'd asked for them, he might have provided them. But as the landlord pointed out, and I pointed out, you wouldn't put fire extinguishers in that HMO. They said there was no fire exit sign. Well, there wasn't one because it wasn't a complicated exit, and there was only one way in and one way out of the flat. So some of the nonsense they come up with.
They tried to find anything.
Yeah, but the landlord had made an application. There was an application in the system, and the landlord had all the paperwork, better paperwork than the council, and that particular council had deleted a bunch of records by accident when it moved from one licensing system to another. And so the landlord had better records than anybody else. He could prove he'd made a license application. He had a receipt for his payment. He had a bank statement proving it. He was innocent. This should never have been pursued. It should never have got to a hearing.
But they probably did it because their record shows there's no license, and they go with it.
But let me say, if the landlord had not come to me at the end of the process, had come to me at the beginning of the process, I wouldn't have needed to go to a hearing because I'd have got the application struck out at the beginning because he had enough evidence. But because he received the directions like most people do, he just followed what he thought he was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it was only at the last minute he was talking to a friend who said, you better talk to landlord licensing and defence. And then he said, oh, right, sounds like you know what you're doing. Get in there. And I got him off. And very unusual, I've never had a judge before say on the day, could you step outside? We need to discuss this and decide if we're going to give you a decision today. And he gave the decision on the day. So we walked out of there. Normally you wait 5 to 6 weeks. So, but yes.
So it was kind of a straightforward case then.
It was a straightforward, but it wasn't because the arguments were, but most of them, there are so many rent repayment orders being made. There's an enormous amount more going to be made because of more offences that are going to be qualifying for those. And literally as a landlord, if you're not getting it right, you're going to be paying back the rent. And it's going to be up to 2 years under the Renters' Rights Act.
Yeah.
So gone are the days of a landlord getting in the rent payment, taking out his costs and going, I'll spend the money on whatever I do. You need to be investing that. And when you've got at least 2 years saved up, then maybe spend some money. So it's not a career anymore for the light-hearted. It's not a career for a spendthrift. It is a career for an investor.
Yeah. Long term.
Yeah.
Long term. Yeah. Okay. And I wanted to ask, I keep hearing about the renters' rights bill. So can you explain what is that?
The Renters' Rights Bill is now Renters' Rights Act 2025. And this is what the government has done through Parliament to take a lot of legislation that already existed, that you would needed to take the landlord or the perpetrator of the crime or the offence to the magistrates' court in order to effect a fine. The problem with that for a council is, one, it's a cost to them. Two, when they do it, they don't get the money. They might get their costs back, or some of their costs back, but they don't get the amount of the fine. And the magistrates' court generally fines a lot lower than the local housing authority. So what it's done is it's converted, like it did with the Housing and Planning Act 2016, it's converted a number of offences that now can be enforced against through the civil penalty regime. And because it can be enforced through the civil penalty regime, the council can now impose a fine following their enforcement process, which they all will have written already. They'll follow that process. They'll then impose the fine. You will represent against the fine, and then they'll give the final fine. And then if you don't agree, then you go to the tribunal. And that's a lot. Most of our work is dealing with fines that people are told they're going to get a fine, and they need to represent, and then we go and appeal if we need to. But generally, most of them we sort in the middle part. It's the same with rent repayment orders. The other parts of it that people don't particularly like are the removal of Section 21, which is the no-fault eviction. I think it's a good thing. One, because now landlords can't be lazy. They're going to have a reason to evict somebody. Two, you're going to have to pick them better so that you don't have problems. People who give you problems always give you problems, so don't pick problem tenants. Furthermore, the council will no longer say, when you try to evict, you need Section 21, get your landlord to give you Section 21, and then you can go on the housing list. So there won't be new people going onto the housing list because of no-fault evictions.
Yes,
Yeah. So if they're at fault because they didn't pay their rent, or they're at fault because of antisocial behaviour, then they've made themselves intentionally homeless. So it removes some of the problems for the council.
Yeah.
Now, you're probably thinking, well, what's going to happen to those people? Well, if they can't get housed by the council and they're being evicted by the court, they need to live somewhere. Well, there's nowhere for them to live because we're not building enough houses. So where are they going to live? Well, they're going to go live in those tents with all the other people who live in tents in London. But that's not allowed because that's being vagrant. We need to repeal the Vagrancy Act, which they did earlier this year. Do you remember?
And what then that
So vagrancy, you can't be a vagrant living on the streets. Well, if you remove that law that prevents that from happening, now people can set up living anywhere they like.
And so
The government
did they remove it?
They removed the Vagrancy Act earlier this year.
And so now that's why you see people camping in central London.
You're going to see a lot more of it. As I read this week, while the government's sorting out the paperwork for everyone, there'll be people sleeping on the streets. And this is unfortunate. But that's part of it. And then you've also got all the new grounds under Section 8 to replace Section 21. And some of them are absolutely fantastic. And they will work. And I think we're going to have a much better system because landlords are going to know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and why they want to take a property back. There'll be security of tenure for more people. It's going to be easier for people to live. And if I were renting a property and I moved to that area and then my children were in primary school and secondary school and I want to know that my children can stay in the school, then I'm renting the house and I know that there's no reason except for the landlord wanting to move himself or a close relative into the property that my child's going to sit at that school without disruption for that period of time, as long as I pay the rent, report the repairs, and I keep the house in a tenant-like manner.
Okay. And for example, if the landlord is facing difficulties, financial difficulties, interest rates has went up, and now he has to sell the property, what do you do in this case?
Well, imagine the tenant is able to pay the rent.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're confident of paying the rent. And the landlord's making a profit from that rent. Mm-hmm. What's the mortgage going to be on the property? Less than the rent.
Yes.
So if I were a landlord and I wanted to sell a property because I'm in financial difficulties, I'd be looking at doing a deal with my tenant. I'd be helping my tenant to get a mortgage. I'd be helping my tenant saying, well, why don't I lend you the deposit? Because it's already in the house.
Yeah.
You go and get a mortgage and you can pay me over the next 25 years the deposit.
Okay.
The landlord's now cashed out and he's got 75%. If he's in for 100% of the property and he needs all of the money, it's not the property that's the problem, it's the landlord's discipline and financial management.
Yes. And
So-
so I'm talking about the landlord hasn't planned his finances properly. He's just like, okay, I got a property, I'm excited, let's go. I don't know the numbers. Everyone says property is cool. I need to be investor. So now I'm an investor. Rates changes, property prices goes down, equity is less than it was before. Now I need to sell so I can get myself out of the trouble, but because it is tenanted, what to do?
Okay. He might be able to sell it tenanted. He might be able to do some creative deals with somebody. But the mortgage company or the lender will be able to repossess the property if he defaults.
Yeah.
So the first thing the landlord should be doing is seeking advice from those people who solve these problems and saying, what can I do here? But I would be looking to see if the tenant is interested in buying,
Yes.
because it's going to be the easiest solution most of the time. And I had a conversation with somebody just a few weeks ago about a problem they have with a tenant. And the revealing thing was the tenant's got £100,000 in cash in their bank account.
That's good for the
And I
budget.
said to them, your tenant would probably love to buy the property.
If you assist them.
Have you talked to them about it? No. Why? Because they want a rent repayment order. I said, it could all be part of the deal.
Exactly.
Yeah? They
You,
might be
you allow
interested-
them to win and you win and everyone
Yeah.
wins.
It's not. No, it's very hard in this day and age for everybody to win. But what does really work and works for most people is talk to somebody who knows more than you do.
Yeah.
Work out what their suggestions are and go, how can I make this win so I get what I want, they get what they want, and anybody else gets what they want. We may not all win, but we get something we can all live with.
Yeah.
And being a landlord today, if I was to finish to say, it's not about just being compliant. It's not about being just right. It's about learning to do it with something you can live with that still pays.
Yeah. Okay, Des, you're very knowledgeable and you are the expert, not only in London, but in UK, national-wide. And my question is this. Now, how do you make sure that landlords would know about what you can do for them and how you help them? Like, how do you make sure, how do you reach out to them and how do you inform them?
I've partnered with a number of organisations who put on events across the country. Property and Poppadoms, Phoenix Property Meet, Blue Bricks Magazine, Property Investor News. These are people that I work alongside to make sure that I'm informing people through articles, by attending events, by doing presentations and telling people what the latest things are, both regionally and nationally. And it's really important that people subscribe and look for those things. Very, very simply, somebody said to me, you know, you're really easy to find. All I did was put Des Taylor Landlords or Des Landlords into Google and it came up. Now, of course, things will come up with artificial intelligence, etc., and there'll be different things. Be very, very careful what you pick up on the internet because it's the best of the worst and the worst of the best. I'll say that again. It's the best of the worst and the worst of the best. So AI and the internet is going to give you bad information. And I can spot it a mile off. So think the council can too, so can the judiciary. And don't get yourself in contempt of the tribunal or court. It's really important that we get these things right. So do search, do look, but go to Landlord's Defence. We're putting stuff out all the time. We're putting out blogs. We've got 1 or 2 blogs. We're building a separate blog of education alongside the main blog that we send out every week through our newsletter. Subscribe to that. Look at the YouTube channel. Follow on social media. Just look Des Taylor Landlords or at Landlords or whatever. You will find information. There's more than enough information, but some of the people that we work alongside are cross-referencing in the industry. So very, very interestingly, the auction market is one of the biggest areas I see where people buy properties and they buy it and they don't realise they're under enforcement action the day it completes. So we help people, working with people like DocuWise, working with people like the Auction Buyers Club. So when things happen, such as I bought a property, I've just realised it's got a load of compliance things and I've got 28 days to complete, we'll go through that with them and tell them what they need to do. So on the day of completion, they know exactly what to do, whether that's apply for a licence, whether they need to get something done with an extension on a prohibition order or an improvement notice. We'll go through that with them. And that's the same for anybody buying any property. If you are thinking about buying a property, if you're thinking of investing, if you're thinking about doing rent to rent, we can give an holistic view of what you need to be covering to make sure that you know what you're doing right.
Yeah. And so YouTube, Instagram, property meetings, website, newsletter. That's how you can find.
You know, people will say to me, "You're everywhere."
Okay.
I'm not everywhere. I just appear. But Des Taylor, Landlords, very, very simple. You'll find information and then just follow through from that. But easily, the fastest way is ring 0208 088 3494. 0208 088 3494. And if you ring that number, you'll get through to somebody in the office. They'll take some details, work out whether you need some help to talk to me or whether you need to talk to somebody else, and we will take you to the next step. Simple as.
Perfect. So, as a business owner, marketing is the key. And one of the things, how people are going to find you. My question is, how much time and effort you are investing in marketing and attending those events? It's a marketing.
I'm informing people because it's my mission to inform people. I want to get out and inform people because nobody else cares enough to do it. Nobody else who's really getting involved in these things gets as deep dive as passionate about it as I do. I want to fix this. There's far too many people breaking the law who don't realise it. I want to get the news out there because we've got more than enough work, we've got more than enough issues going on, and we want to get less people getting into less trouble. What I'd love is one day to be without a job because everybody's getting it right. But I dream the same way as I dream that people won't jump red lights and they won't break the speed limit.
Ideal world. And you have also referred people to us.
Yeah.
And my question is this: why did you refer people to us? Why not someone else?
For me to go out and do a floor plan or to get photos of a property to see if it's compliant, to know whether there are intermittent strips and cold smoke seals on the doors, it's far better for me to use your company or a company like yours in other parts of the country to go and do that job and get me the information 24, 48, 72 hours later. And I will remember there was a gentleman up in East Anglia and I said, look, you've got this deadline, you're out of time, your floor plans are wrong, everything's really wrong. And he said, oh, well, what am I going to do about it? He said, I can't get anybody. I said, ring these guys, tell him where you are, ask him if you can pay him extra to get on the train, can he come tomorrow? And I know that, Peter, you got on the train, you went up there, you did it, and how he'd laid it out on the plans to us was very different to how it really was. We were able to advise him, we were able to get him out of trouble, we were able to manage all of that, so he didn't get any enforcement. Yeah? So his investment in you was absolute. It really did work well. But most of the time, people need, for an HMO license, they need a floor plan. Or for a selective license, you need a floor plan. Half of them are taking stuff that's been measured by somebody who doesn't know how to measure them. Sometimes they're measuring them and the room's coming up too small. When if it's been properly measured with a measured survey, if it's been properly done with photographs, and you can present those photographs as well, they're high quality. You can make something that looks average look brilliant.
And use it in your marketing when you try to find tenants.
It works. And everything that you've done, and I know a number of landlords who've just gone, wow, that was wonderful. That really worked. But it was information the council looked at and they didn't need to come and inspect before they gave the license. They've gone, it's good enough for us. The pictures are good. It shows it's in good quality. We can see the bits we need to. And for us also, if we had a contentious property, and we were worrying about room sizes, we could ask you to go and do it because there's no point in me getting on a train and going measuring rooms with a laser measurer or a tape measure.
When there's specialist people who can...
And that's what we do. So what you're doing and what we were doing in that situation is it comes very much from a book called Who, Not How. We all know how to measure a room. We learned that at school. I know how to measure a room. But for me, it was more important for our clients that I used the who. And I will always remember that we can call your company, you can do what you can book it online, you can get it sorted. So space photo. But the interesting thing is, when you were photography at one of those property meets where I was hosting it, that's how we met. And we've gone through this process all these years later, working together, doing things and making things work. When you've come one of the preeminent companies in the country, there are 3 or 4 companies that do what you do, and you are probably number 1 or number 2.
Yeah, and we actually met, if people can see on the camera, just over there, next to Tower Bridge.
In this building here.
In this building over there. If you can see that, yes. And I get to know you personally
Yeah.
from those meetings.
Yeah.
Not from online, not from somewhere else, but meeting in person. And I do believe that there is something special when you meet people and you build those relationships, you build the trust, because it's know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
And that's why people refer people. That's why people refer other businesses, because they have worked with them, because they have seen them. And if something goes wrong, you always know where to find them. It's not someone online.
No.
It's like, okay, don't pick up the phone anymore. Don't answer the emails.
Yeah.
They disappear. Next time you meet, it's like, yo, what's going on? What happened there?
Well, I spoke to a gentleman today, and interestingly, he said, I've hesitated in calling you because of the cost. And he said, so many landlords told me to talk to you, and I didn't. I said, yeah, you've got to a point now, you've gone past the appeal date. You've done everything, even though it's in the paperwork, you haven't followed it exactly as you need to. Now, we can still do something, but these are the situation that you're going to have to go through. These are the steps that are going to have to be followed. And then I started talking about the costs. He's gone, oh, those were the costs I was expecting. So there wasn't anything expensive, really. Does he need all of what we need? No. I believe, as I said to him, for a quarter of the cost, we'll get to a stage where he will be in a better position than he's ever been in before. But the bit that I said to him was, well, you've been arguing everything that you've presented, you have self-incriminated over and over again. But when I read this, can I say that I probably see that 90% of this has been produced by AI and is incorrect, partially right, but incorrect. Now, I see it, the council sees it, that's why they don't respond to you, because they know you haven't got professional representation. Yeah. This could have been solved if you come to us when they first inquired about the problem, because the way they've calculated things, it fits within their policy, but their policy isn't a fair policy, and it's unlikely the tribunal will change anything because you haven't challenged it in the right way. That's why you're still where you are. So it's cost you an awful lot more time, effort, and money. And what was interesting was I spoke to the guy, and then I said to him, what is it you do for a living? And he said, I'm a quantity surveyor. And I said, oh, that's interesting. You know the cost of leaving things out. You know the cost of doing things right. He said, yeah, but you don't always see it yourself until somebody points it out. And that we all go through that. Seek professional advice. You might not want it, but it might open your eyes to what you need.
Exactly. And it's not always the cost, but it's sometimes the result that you get.
Absolutely.
On the peace of the mind and the security is more important than just the cost. Because if the cost doesn't deliver what you want, then it doesn't really matter how much it costs, because it's not what you need. So I'll leave you with this. Thank you, guys. I hope this was useful. This is Des from landlordsdefense.co.uk.
That's it.
You can reach out to him directly. Any questions that you as a landlord, property investor, you have, you can ask his team or himself, and they'll be able to advise. Thank you, Des.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Perfect.